All right, there will be bourbon. I've finally branched out of the usual chats that I do, and I've managed to coerce my favorite San Francisco Giants media member, Mr. Jeff Young. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, Eric. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for that nice introduction.
Absolutely. I appreciate you dredging down here with me in the slums of the bourbon world. You yourself will be drinking wine. That is right. That's what we're doing.
I am. I have a glass of Chardonnay with me right now, Frog's Leap
Chardonnay,
Winery, which is in Napa, California.
where I just left.
Uh, where you just left. So very good wine and a very good location.
Agreed. And so this is Jeff Young. You can follow him on Twitter at BaseballJeff1. As I said, he is the FanSided editor for the San Francisco Giants at Round the Foghorn. And as always, this will be sponsored, sort of, by America's Native Spirit, which is bourbon. And because of our mutual fandom locations, which is California, although you are not there, you live in Nevada, or you are in Sparks, Nevada, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's good. So I've got something at least from the California State Redwood Empire revisiting this. It's a pretty cool bourbon. They do source from around the country with Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee, but they do some distilling at their own. It's in the distilleries it's up in Granton, California. But the cool thing about this, it is bottled and finished in California, but for every bottle you buy, they'll plant a tree. So there you go. We're gonna save the planet at the same time, Jeff. You know, big into the trees. And it is like an ode to the redwoods. So if you are ever in California, please just don't go and visit cities like LA. Please get up and actually see the state, specifically the northern part.
State.
Yeah, and go to the Giants games. And then because you are in Nevada, I am going to go with a little Fry Ranch. It's over in Fallon.
Okay, right on.
Nevada, is that close to you? I don't know where this is at.
Where's it at exactly?
Whatever, right? So it's in Nevada, but one of the cool things they do, it is so most bourbons are 3 grains, right? As long as it's primarily corn, 51%. They do 4 grains, so they mix the rye with some wheat, and then they finish it with bourbon, and it's about 66% corn. So it is a great 4-grain whiskey, and that's what we're going to be using to fuel tonight's discussion. So there you go. All right, and Jeff's drinking the wine. Good for him. You know, we'll start there. All right, so the World Series ended. Good timing award. How'd you feel about Bruce Bochy grabbing number 4, Mr. Forever Giant?
Yeah, it was pretty cool to see Bochy get his 4th World Series title. It really just puts him in elite company in terms of historic major league managers. I mean, he's one of just a handful of people who have won at least 4 titles and who have won at least 2,000 games. I mean, it's just he was already going to the Hall of Fame prior to this, but this just I think puts him in a different company altogether as one of the great managers in baseball history. So very cool to see Bochy win it again. Very cool to see the Rangers kind of break their it was their first championship. So I think they were established in the late 60s. So it's been a long time coming, and it was cool to see it a team win it for the first time.
Yeah, it is pretty wild for teams that have been around as long as they have to not win, and we kind of take titles for granted regardless of whatever sport it is. There's some teams that have multiple, like the Giants, all those other teams. The Yankees are obviously the most spoiled franchise in professional sports, but there are a lot of Texas Rangers out there. They're like the Buffalo Bills of football. They don't ever win anything. But they're there.
Yeah.
So, okay, now because we're talking about Bochy, and we do have a new hire for the managerial position in the Giants organization. Are they trying to follow the Bochy path by taking another previous Padres manager who underachieved with a star-studded roster and trying to win now in San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, there's more than one similarity between Melvin and Bochy coming from San Diego, both being former catchers, both having a good bit of managerial history prior to joining the Giants. Melvin is local to the area, having attended Cal Berkeley. He went to Menlo Atherton High School. I think it's just cool that he gets to join the team that he grew up rooting for. I mean, during his introductory press conference, he mentioned how excited he was, talking about his roots. It was one of the first things he mentioned. And it just like, there was something about it that was so like kind of special in him being brought in. But, to your point about the similarities between Bochy and Melvin, of course, there's going to be quite a few. Not just the fact that they both previously managed the San Diego Padres. They've been managing for a long time. They're probably much similar in comparison to each other than say going from Bochy to Kapler, who's just on the opposite side of the analytical spectrum. But I think Melvin's maybe closer to a happy medium. So I like the hire.
Yeah, no, my first reaction was, all right, I'm a fan first, right? I don't approach this often with not lack of common sense. I don't approach this initially lacking emotion, right? That's what I do. I overreact to the Giants, and I'm worse with the Bears in football. But so yeah, my first reaction was, with a team or a roster like the Padres, how do you go from on the cusp of the World Series to not even in the playoffs, right? Finishing third in the division, barely getting above 500. So that was my first thing. It's like, wait a minute, if this guy can't win with that lineup, we already know what we got in San Francisco, right? So 2 questions, right, in one.
Sure.
So what made them, aside from all the things you just laid out, the local connection, the previous ties with the organization, but why go to someone like Bob Melvin, who's been a manager for a long time, obviously, as opposed to maybe looking to someone who's a lot younger, maybe a former player also, but younger. But also the second part of that question is, how come we don't see, like we see in other sports, where I guess baseball would be unique because they would pull from the minor leagues, which don't really exist in other sports. But how come no one is taken into consideration along those hires from like the double and the triple A? But then also, why not just someone who's, I guess, younger and a former player?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to answer that last question
Yeah.
first. I mean, the Giants did interview a bunch of potential first-time managers or candidates without any managerial experience at pretty much any level in the pros. I mean, Mark Holberg, who's the Giants'
Yeah.
third base coach, he was viewed as an one of the top internal candidates, and his managerial experience begins and ends with the Salem Kaiser Volcanoes in 2019, which was a short season affiliate for the Giants. So, they did they did interview a bunch of former players and coaches without managerial experience. So, I mean, I think you have to kind of make a name for yourself on a coaching staff,
Yeah.
or I mean, there are some instances of somebody getting hired basically straight from the media. I think that was the case with a guy like Aaron Boone, who just knew how to talk baseball. But really, you kind of have to make a name for yourself somewhere on a coaching staff, somewhere in a front office before you can really rise up and become a serious managerial candidate. So I think that's why it's tough to go straight from like former player to manager in baseball. I think you just need some experience that comes with that. The Giants interviewed guys like Stephen Vogt, who's been out of baseball for a year now, and he's on the Mariners coaching staff. He'll probably be a manager sooner rather than later, but you need that experience to go with it before you can really become a manager. And Melvin has all that experience, and I kind of forgot where your first question was. This is what
the
wine
first
does.
one is why they would go with someone who, which I think you kind of answered, but someone who's been a manager multiple times but didn't really have a lot of success where they left from. Like, what made them ultimately kind of settle on Melvin, aside from the connections to the organization, I guess? Because, like I said, he was probably could have made a good case for being in the World Series last year, just the way things ended in Philly. But then you go with that team, like I said, and you don't make the playoffs at all. And now we're expecting him to do something with a roster that's significantly less potent. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, to your point, I think familiarity plays such a big role when it comes to these hires. Front offices can and do hire outside of their kind of inner circle. But, what we've seen from Anxiety so far is that he tends to he tends to hire people within his circle. And Gabe Kapler was among those. Bob Melvin was certainly among those, dating back to their days with the Oakland A's when Zaidi was an assistant general manager and Melvin was the manager early in his tenure with Oakland. So I think that familiarity plays a key role. And, if if my thought process on this is that if the entire managerial field was open for Zaidi to choose from, I have a feeling that given his prior ties, given Melvin's experience, I have a feeling that he'd probably be one of Zaidi's top options. Just for a lot of different reasons. If not the top option, just because they go back, years and years ago. I think he's, he has the experience and the familiarity, and maybe the trust in Zaidi, and maybe the trust goes both ways because Zaidi knows how Melvin operates, and Melvin knows how Zaidi operates, and I think that just goes a long way in why the Giants went with him as the next manager.
So, I mean, from a fan perspective, I can sit here and tell you this is why it happened. But someone who's a little more level-headed and even keeled like yourself, maybe you can be like, so what ultimately did Kapler in? It was just the lack of the ability to kind of repeat the 2021 success, and no real, I guess, in the future, I guess, looking like there was going to be some magical turnaround. Like this was kind of what we were with Gabe Kapler as I wouldn't even say underachieving. I think he's doing what he can with the team, right? But I would say the fact that we weren't going to get much better than probably either 500 or just below, is that kind of where they looked at with Kapler?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of points I think I want to try and hit on with this one, because I don't think the team's struggles really extend, to Gabe Kapler in 2023. I mean, I think it was a roster that did just about what many expected it to do. Guys like Mitch Haniger and Michael Conforto really underperformed. If they had done what they were expected, maybe the Giants would have won a couple of extra games. But that really is on the players to do. Yeah, Haniger. I mean, bad. For a guy who's had a really nice career up until this point, he looked awful last year. No way around it. But I don't know if 2023 was really a function of Kapler's in-game managing. I think there were things that were going on behind the scenes. I know there were questions as to whether the players were actually, fully prepared and engaged in baseball, because it's a grind. I mean, there were definitely some weird stories, guys playing games, and that's okay. It's one of those things that, like, if you're winning and you're doing this, then it's like fun and funky. But if you're losing, it's like, what is this guy doing playing, card games and all that? But, there were legitimate questions about how he was managing the clubhouse, how he was getting the players prepared for the games, and how he was kind of leading the team. I mean, one thing that kind of stands out is, the fact that they had a team meeting and it was led by a guy like Ron Wotus, who, if you ask me, he should have been, somebody who was seriously considered for the managerial opening. He wasn't, because he just, maybe he's happy in the role that he's in. I don't know what the exact thing was, but the fact that, Gabe Kapler, the manager, allowed Wotus to kind of be the leader of that team meeting. I mean, that just kind of makes me think that, I don't know if he was fully engaged. Maybe he was. I know he was putting work in every day, but it just felt like something slipped halfway through the season. I'm not sure what it was. Maybe it was just the team struggles. But at the end of the day, and this is kind of where I arrived at some point in this season, like, I think Kapler did fine in the job that he was in, and I don't think his performance or the team's performance merited him to be fired. At the end of the day, I just, I think I have stronger opinions about Farhan Zaidi as a team president of baseball operations than I did for Kapler. And after 4 seasons, I was like, I've watched this guy every day, and I just didn't have a strong opinion one way or the other as to whether they should keep him or not. And in my mind, if they were looking for a way to improve the team, I think he's somebody that you could certainly do worse than. But I think there was an opportunity to get somebody who had a better reputation among players, a better, track record of success. And I think that's where, that, to me, that's kind of maybe what led to his downfall, is just the fact that they could have done better from a managerial standpoint. I don't think he did anything necessarily, wrong in an egregious sense, but I just think that, after 4 years, we had seen enough that, Kapler at his best was maybe an okay manager. And, if all the pieces fell into place like it did in 2021, he looks like a genius. But outside of that, which is really where I think Kapler's work needs to be judged, is the fact that outside of the 2021 season, I think he was just very okay across the board, and somebody who, they could have kept going in the next season. And I think somebody they could have upgraded from. And I think that's where somebody like Melvin comes into place.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned that, like, I honestly, because as I did say, I'm a Chicago Bears fan, and I think, like, to me, Gabe Kapler in that 2021 season reminds me exactly of Matt Nagy with the Chicago Bears in the 2018 season. And here's the two instances why I say it. They vastly overachieved with their roster, right? Bears get to the
Sure.
playoffs against the Eagles. Trubisky leads them down. Cody Parkey double doinks, misses that. And they're never the same from them, right? Like, they're never the same from that. Like, that moment solidified legacies for so many people on that team, from Nagy to Trubisky all the way down the line. And Flores didn't swing.
He didn't.
That
He
moment,
didn't.
though, that moment erased all 107 previous wins. Like, it didn't even matter after that. Like, and the Dodgers go on to lose, whatever, just like the Eagles did. But it didn't matter, because that moment changed everything from that point forward. And it automatically just same exact thing. The next two seasons, underachievement based on previous levels of success. And I think that's the exact type of person that Kapler and Nagy were. Like, they managed to catch lightning in a bottle for one season, but somebody's failure, and in this case, it wasn't Flores, it was the ump. And then actually Cody Parkey actually did fail in that moment. But it's crazy the effect ripple wise that it does on everybody throughout an organization.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that stands, I hate having to keep coming back to this, but the thing that differentiates 2021, one of the main things, obviously there's a couple that differentiates 2021 and the ensuing two seasons, is the presence of Buster Posey, who is fantastic that year, but also the fact that they passed on Kevin Gausman for one reason or another.
Yeah, that was weird.
Him going to the it was. I mean, going to the Toronto Blue Jays for a deal that was extremely affordable for the team. I mean, and he's gone on. Maybe year 5 looks terrible, but the first 2 seasons, I mean, he's been an all-star and probably going to be receiving, down ballot Cy Young votes again this year. I think that's one thing that kind of stands out as to like what was the turning points. It's, obviously Posey's retirement, and then passing on Kevin Gausman, who seemingly wanted to stay in San Francisco, and was, not only a good, fit for the Giants, but also a good cultural fit for the organization as well. So those are a couple of things that stand out from that season.
Yeah, I was in there. I was at Game 5, and I sat there for like a half hour with the other people around me, and we just kept going on Twitter, like, look, he didn't swing.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back for just a second, because I meant to ask you and I didn't, but how did you end up getting into the Giants? Was this a team you grew up liking, or are you from that area?
Yeah, so I grew up I grew up in pretty much the same area that Bob Melvin grew up in. A couple of towns down. I don't know how familiar you are with that area. But yeah, this is just a little bit of a tangent. I just mentioned
tangents are great.
Like 10 days ago. Tangents are great. Yeah, I mentioned like 10 days ago when Bob Melvin got the approval to interview for the Giants. I was like, yeah, he's, I think one thing that's really important is that he's local to the South Bay. And I think I mixed that up with the Peninsula, and those are two different areas. They're bordering each other. And I mentioned South Bay, and there were quite a few people who were like, it's actually the Peninsula, you moron.
So, yeah, they can't just say it's actually the Peninsula. They always got to throw in the insult afterwards.
That's how I read it. They didn't know. I don't think anyone called me a moron, but there was one guy who was nice about it. And I was like, hey, man, it's been like 15 years. I don't know.
I'm done with your Bay areas,
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up rooting for the Giants. My first season was, really being a Giants fan was 97 with, Jeff Kent being traded, Barry Bonds doing that little pirouette thing.
Yeah.
Dusty Baker reaching the playoffs for the first time. and having that Brian Johnson game in '97 against the Dodgers. That was pretty cool. So, been a Giants fan for a long, long time. I started writing for Around the Foghorn sometime in 2017,
Okay.
becoming the side expert in 2020. Writing's always been a passion of mine, and so has baseball. So, I just kind of mash those two things together to do what I do currently. So, hopefully,
Cool.
my help is that I occasionally put out some nice content.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, obviously, I like it enough. I think it's good. I think it's, and plus, I think the best part about you is you're very accessible. So that's cool. People like that.
Yeah.
In my little crazy giant circle, they all speak very highly of you. So,
Thank you.
yeah. No, it's funny you bring up '97. So that would have been so I grew up, I was a Pirates fan growing up, but mainly because of Barry Bonds. Pirates were my first little league team I ever played for. And then naturally
Nice.
it's like, oh, who's on the Pirates? And it was Andy Van Slyke, Bonilla, and Bonds.
Yep.
And instantly gravitated to Bonds because he had an earring, and that's all I wanted in my life at that point. So yeah. So I remember I was away at I don't know, some baseball camp that was like a week long, staying away from my family for the first time as a kid. And I remember one of the headlines on the papers was the Giants had signed Barry Bonds. And I was like, all right,
oh no,
Giants fan now. So that was it. I'm a Giants fan ever since.
How funny that works.
Yeah, and it's kind of I love how you mentioned '97 was the first year that the Giants got into the playoffs with Dusty Baker, but it was crazy because I think it was either Bond's first or second year where I thought they won 102 games, but there was no wild card back then, and they didn't make it. And it's just crazy to think about teams like that who now look, the Diamondbacks win 84 games and they get to the World Series.
Yeah.
Like anybody once you get in can win, right? And that's what's kind of cool, but. Yeah, for a while, it's weird that for as long of a sport as baseball has been around, that they never really had that until really fairly recently. And it's made it much more exciting as a fan for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the appeal, right? Because more and more teams have a chance of making the playoffs, and as soon as you make the playoffs, you have a shot at the World Series. We saw that with the Diamondbacks. We've seen that, even a team like the Phillies last year making the playoffs. They didn't perform that well in the regular season. They were a back end wild card team, but they weren't like any team that like anyone suspected to make the World Series. But it happens. And that Giant season that you're referencing, I think that was the season that really made the wild card thing a necessity because you don't want to see a 103 win team not make the playoffs. I mean, that's crazy. Like now, it's like. You win 103 games. You're easily going to be first in your division. This was in '93. This was before the Central Division even existed, and this was with the Atlanta Braves being in the West.
Yeah,
which made no sense. I didn't get
Divisions
it.
I think I don't know why we have divisions.
Yeah.
Just have leagues and just call it a day.
Yeah, I didn't get that. I think if I remember correctly, I'm a Niners fan too, but I think the Atlanta Falcons were also in the same division as the Niners at one point. So I don't know if there's some like sport carryover there that makes no sense. So,
well, I mean, it's like the same with the Seahawks. Like at some point, like they were in the same division with the Broncos and Denver and, Kansas City Chiefs and all before they went to the NFC. Like sports division never made sense. I'm sure it was a good idea theory at one point that floated around, but it's never really made sense.
Yep.
So let me get back to this tier because I know what we're like. I can honestly, I was never a Gabe Kapler fan. I thought, I didn't really care for him when he was in Philly. All my family are Philly fans, from a baseball perspective. Outside of my brother, he's an Angels fan because he lives in Southern California. Nobody I've ever known has liked Gabe Kapler from the Phillies. I thought he was great as a kid growing up. Like, I just remember him being like this Jack AAA All-Star that finally made it into the majors. And I was like, man, this dude is cool. I thought he was cool as a kid growing up. I thought Gabe Kapler was a cool player, but I never really cared for him as a manager. Right. So, I think for him to do as good as he did, because let's be honest, if Giants fans could be honest with the ultimate outcome of this season, I mean, look how many rookies played this year. From Luis Matos to Patrick Bailey to, all these guys that came in and actually made meaningful, impactful starts, to Kyle Harrison coming in at the end, finally making his debut. Casey Smith, it was a great story for the first month before he forgot how to hit, and then he kind of figured it out again at the end. Like, you had so many young guys come up that could be a potential core for this team in the future. What were your thoughts and kind of how do you feel they are going to be aligned going forward? Do you think all those guys are going to stay and they're going to be in the lineup as of next year going on permanently, or do you think there's some of them that still got to kind of fight their way in?
Yeah, I mean, I think Marco Luciano, Farnside,
Yeah.
even said that he was going to have the inside track for the starting shortstop gig. If you look through free agency at that position, there's just not a lot of obvious upgrades. So they might just kind of have to run with that unless they make a trade, which, let's face it, the Giants really haven't made too many like substantial trades. They've made
Chris
some nice
Bryant,
trades over the
yeah.
past few years. Chris
Yeah.
Bryant's the only one
Yeah.
really over the past 5 years where they're
Yeah.
trading, prospect capital to get a player. They haven't really made that trade in years. So I don't know if that trend is going to change this year, but recent history would suggest otherwise. So I mean, I think Marco Luciano has an inside track. Patrick Bailey, I think his defensive acumen, his defensive skills,
Yeah.
make him a prime candidate to be the starting catcher next year. And I hope they kind of pair him with a solid backup catcher, somebody who can handle maybe 40 or 50 games. It just seemed like, with Blake Sable on the roster, who did his best, learning catching on the fly, which is really what he was doing. He had like 94 games as a pro at catcher prior to the season. And you look at guys like Patrick Bailey, who's been catching his entire life. It's like, it's not fair.
Yeah.
And I think he did a nice job of trying to learn things on the fly. But, with that being said, I think the Giants just need a little more experience to back up Bailey because he did wear down at the end of the year, which was expected because he had played 80 plus games like just once as a pro. So, I think they just need a good backup behind him, but I think he showed enough to be the everyday catcher next season. And then, to your point about guys like Casey Schmidt, I don't know if he showed enough this year to really stick on the opening day roster. He'd really have to have a nice spring training to do so, and maybe even an injury or two creates an opportunity for him. But he showed improvement at controlling the strike zone. His chase rate improved as the season progressed, and his struggles early on, I mean, they were almost predictable because he was just expanding the strike zone so much that you just knew that pitchers were going to take advantage of that, and they did. And he tried to improve on that.
In college is what it looked like.
So. Yeah. I mean, I used to be a patient hitter when I played baseball, but at some point I was like, you know what? I don't want the umpire making a call anymore. So I'm just going to swing at anything that's close. So I can sympathize with Casey Schmidt. But I think he needs more time in AAA. I mean, I do think they rushed his promotion when they did it in May, even though he kind of hit the ground running. Luis Matos, I mean, I could go either way. He was really hitting well when he was called up, so it wasn't like it was a premature decision on their part to call him up because he was just killing the ball in AAA. So, I think the hope is that. I know everyone says that he needs to add weight, but I think the Giants want him to, kind of maintain his athletic frame to be able to handle center field because that's a big part of his skill set. So maybe he adds a little bit of weight, but I don't think he's going to get to the point where he looks like Elliot Ramos, who's really just built like a linebacker. At this point. And then Kyle Harrison, I'd be surprised if he didn't start the year on the opening day rotation. I feel like I don't, especially now. I think we saw enough.
Yeah.
I mean, that creates.
He's not coming back. So, well, not anytime soon, at least, unfortunately. But.
Yeah, that creates an opportunity for Harrison. I'm gonna turn down the light a little bit because I don't like how it's like.
Yeah, turn down the lights. Right, make it a little more romantic in here, Jeff. Let's go, buddy.
Let's do that.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah,
okay, he's there. So no, I was just curious because I mean I've never like something about Elliot Ramos. I don't know. He just doesn't seem like. He didn't seem like last year he had much of a future because every time he got called up, even when he did have a few good games, he was always back on the bench and he never really got a lot of opportunities. And I don't know if that had to do more with 2022 when he kind of, in my opinion, and I don't know if maybe I'm reading too much of this into this, but I remember his debut and he was very like his appearance on the, on the sidelines, like dealing with fans. He just seemed very arrogant. Like he was owed his appearance in the major leagues and he didn't really do much with it in the 2 years ago. And I don't know if that maybe rubbed the organization the wrong way as well, but he never seemed to really get another full-time shot, it felt like. Even when he did have it, he put together a few good hits in pinch hitting situations this year, but it never seemed to carry over in terms of like he got the chance like Matos and Schmidt and these guys who just got extended time no matter whether they succeeded or failed. Is there anything that we don't know of with Ramos and maybe Zaidi?
I'm not sure, to be honest, because like
Yeah.
he performed so well in AAA to the point where it was like, well, this guy needs an opportunity to get an extended look. I mean, they gave everyone, Matos, Casey Schmidt, Wade Meckler, all
Meckler,
these guys
God,
kind of,
that's experiment. I forgot about that.
yeah. They gave all these guys kind of a long look. I mean, they even went to guys like AJ Pollock,
Yeah.
who
Played like
Ramos
as many games
probably
as
could
you and
have
I did.
filled. Yeah, exactly. But like, I mean, they went through all these options before even getting to Ramos, and he never really got an extended look. I'm not sure if there's anything going on behind the scenes, but he did really show improvement this year in AAA. If you look at his numbers, one of his biggest issues was being able to cover the outside part of the plate and having too high of a ground ball rate, which in AAA, if your ground ball rate is like 45% or above, that's really tough to tolerate, because it's you can't really hit extra base hits on the ground.
No.
It happens, but it's usually an accident at that point.
Yeah.
And we saw, in AAA, we saw improvements with his ability to impact the ball at the right angle. His ground ball rate did improve. His line drive rate went up. So, positive things. But at this point, I think it's more about controlling the strike zone. He still strikes out quite a bit. His walk rate is still not too high, and I don't think that's ever going to be part of his game. But it's also a little concerning that he's kind of grown. He's like, what's the phrase? He's like grown out of center field at this point. Like his sprint speed, he's not extremely fast at this point, based on the Baseball Savant data, which is a little concerning, because that was supposed to be a part of his skill set, was a guy who hit for power and was able to handle center field. But it looks like he's more of a kind of
crazy dive in play. We saw him in Richmond a couple years back.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like he's going to be a corner outfielder at this point, and you really have to hit for power.
Got plenty of those.
Outfielder. And yeah. I mean,
unfortunately,
that's the problem. Too many corner outfielders and not enough center fielders. So, I mean, I think Ramos is kind of at that point where, if he's going to be a corner outfielder, he has to hit for a lot of power. He has to be able to lift the ball consistently and have a better, have better swing decisions. And I think he showed improvement in that area. And I was a little surprised that he didn't get more of a look that he did in 2023.
All right. So I already know every Giants fan thinks we're going to try and sign Shohei Ohtani. Is it more likely to get the other guy from Japan? That's a big deal, free agent this year, or what do you think? What was your percent that you would the Giants signing, not making a run? We get that, but what do you think?
Yeah,
how are you, below 50%?
Yeah,
or what?
I don't know. I mean, Andrew Baggerly put out that piece probably about 10 days ago, saying that the Giants will not be outbid for Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who pitches an MVP. He's a star there. However, the same was said, not by Begley, but the same was said for Aaron Judge last year. We know how that played out. So, and the Giants just have not had luck in signing players from the Pacific Rim in the past. Maybe the presence of Bob Melvin helps that this year, but I don't know. It's hard for me to be confident about something that just really hasn't happened for them in a long, long time. Maybe it happens this year. Maybe things start to change, but you look at their history in free agency, you look at their history at signing players internationally, it's just not good. So I'm sitting under 50%. I'd be happy to be wrong about that, though.
Well, I mean, you can't almost break even with less than 50%,
Well, we knew that was coming.
Yeah, I just had to mix that in. So my thing with Shohei, I was wondering what you think about this, because I don't know if maybe you've seen it, or even if you have it on Twitter or X, whatever the hell it's called at this point. We saw how effective Shohei Ohtani was in the World Baseball Classic when he came in the close, right? I'm not sure what it benefits him to come back to try to be a starter. Why not do the two-way thing, but just be a closer and then a DH, and you can do both in the same game. Like there's no reason for him to always to have a second major injury as a pitcher. Like I'm sorry, just based on the human anatomy and the fact that he's gifted enough to throw as hard as he does, he's always going to be injured at some point. Like that's just that you can't throw 100 miles an hour and not have an injury. He's had his second major one. So it's another year-long recovery before he ever pitches again. Why go back to trying to put the stress and strain of being a full-time starter when you can just come out and just dominate for a few innings or a few outs?
Yeah. I mean, money's got to be a big factor there, right? Because that's
closers make money, right? Closers
make money. They do, but that's part of his unique appeal is the fact that he could be, an all-star pitcher and an all-star hitter. I mean, there's just, there's no case study of this really, except for Babe Ruth, but very, very different time back then. Yeah. So I think, money and the fact that he wants to do it is going to be what drives him. But at some point they might have to have a conversation about that. I don't know if this most recent injury was classified as Tommy John surgery. I think it was. It has the same recovery time. It was okay officially. I remember reading something more vague like elbow surgery. So that's why I'm just putting it out there. But if it's a second Tommy John surgery, I mean, I remember doing research on this. I wrote an article years ago about pitchers who what their career span is after their second Tommy John surgery, and it's really not good. That the lifespan might be 4 or 5 years. Of course, I did this in the context of the Giants being interested in Nate Eovaldi, who's I think surpassed everyone's expectations.
Just pitched well
in that regard. Yeah, he's become a postseason force at this point. But he also had 2 Tommy John surgeries, so the recovery process has improved to the point where it might be more viable to pitchers to have a second Tommy John surgery and still have a career after that. That was not the case 10 years ago when guys I don't know if you remember an A's prospect named Jared Parker who had Tommy John surgery, was recovering, had re-injured the elbow, and that ended his career. I mean, that wasn't all that common. But hopefully that's different now. And we've seen with guys like Eovaldi that you can come back from this. So, I mean, for Ohtani, I think, it's money's going to be a big factor, but importantly, this is something that he wants to continue doing because it's something that he is exceptional at. So he's so unique in that regard.
Well, that's why I feel like someone should just sit down there and be like, look, man, you can be an exceptional closer.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I get it. I trust me. I pitched, and I always liked the fact that I could go out and pitch as a starter. I always wanted to do that. But I get, eventually when you come up through the majors and the minor ranks, you get kind of, this is what you're going to do. And I just don't know if anyone's ever said that to him, right? Like, hey, love the fact that you want to do both, but this is what you're going to do. So, yeah, because at some point, the player is the player. He doesn't get to take, he doesn't get to run every decision. But I don't know. I think coming back from a second major surgery like that, and I know there are outliers, and he is probably the outlier of all outliers from a physical standpoint, baseball wise. But yeah, I don't think the odds are in his favor to be like the starter that he was again. And even then, I don't know, maybe your opinion's different, but I wouldn't consider him to be a number 1 starter on every team in baseball. He's a great pitcher, but he's probably more of a number 2 than anything for the length of a season.
He might be. I don't have his numbers in front of me. I know he had a 3+ ERA this year. Thing. So yeah, it's I wonder if we're talking about this 3 or 4 years down the road where it's like, Ohtani has another injury that he has to deal with. I mean, I think that at that point he'll have to make a decision as to whether being a pitcher is viable or whether moving to the bullpen is an option. But it's I mean, he's an extremely effective pitcher when healthy. Is he a number 1? I think he has flashes of that. He throws 100 miles an hour. He's a lefty. So I mean, he has those things in his favor. He's pretty distinct in that regard. But yeah, it's got to be a conversation if these injuries keep flaring up. Hopefully they don't.
Speaking of the two-way stars, right? Giants got a few in their organization. We got to talk about it. You like to do this. You're a big pipeline guy. I guess my question would be: are the Giants actually going to let them do this? And then, in my opinion, it looks like Eldridge is kind of ahead of Crawford. Which do you think has a quicker path here? And are the Giants going to be patient with both of these guys? With Crawford being a little, I guess he's probably 4 years older. Eldridge, I mean, I get it. He's 18, 19 years old. Of course, you're going to be patient, but it looks like he's kind of hit the ground running in the pro circuit. Like, from my opinion, he's hitting the ball hard. I don't know if he's pitched or not. I know you said that they usually don't let guys right out of high school start pitching right away, but is that something the Giants are going to pursue from a two-way standpoint?
Yeah. I mean, that's what they committed to. Reggie Crawford was coming off of Tommy John surgery, so his usage this year was pretty light in both hitting and on the mound. I think he was even, and he had 17 plate appearances this year and 17 innings pitched.
Nice.
So it's just kind of symmetrical in that way. But at least in Arizona Fall League, I got to see him a little bit over the past week. Offensively, I mean, the power looks like a pretty solid tool. There's a lot of swing and miss. He has a pretty aggressive swing, and he works deep counts. So with that, I think there's just there's going to be a lot of strikeouts inherent in his game. I'm not sure if there's much he can do to offset that without sacrificing power. I think the power is going to be his carrying tool offensively, but to me, it's still pitching is his best attribute. He has a good fastball that sits. He's a left-handed pitcher. That sits in the high 90s. He has a good slider. I think the chances of him moving as a pitcher quicker are much more likely than moving as a hitter. But they're going to at least try to experiment with that until they can't anymore. And my hope is that they're not, taking him away from his primary traits, whether that be pitching or hitting, by trying to focus on something that may not pay off down the road. But it's something that they're trying to do right now. Bryce Eldridge looked really good. He reached San Jose this year, which at one point or another, if a high school prospect, and he was on the older side for a high school prospect, I believe, if a high school prospect reached full season ball in their draft year, that was like a big kind of eyebrow raising thing. It's different now because they got rid of short season ball. They, condensed the minor leagues a little bit, but he looked really good in the batter's box in the time that we saw him with San Jose. He hit for power. He made really loud contact. I know there's been a couple of comparisons out there that his swing kind of reminds people of a guy like Matt Chapman. To me, he looks more like Cody Bellinger. There's a violence to his swing. So when he makes contact, he does damage, and it's not similar swing wise to Reggie Crawford, but the outcome is typically the same. Is that when he makes contact, it's pretty damn loud. And on the pitching side, I think he's more of a balanced prospect in that regard. We haven't seen him yet, but he has a good 4-pitch mix. His fastball hits the mid 90s. I think he has better control, better overall pitch mix than Crawford. Or I'm sorry, not better pitch mix, but just more of a balanced skill set than Crawford, in my opinion. But there's people who are going to disagree about that, and that's fine. So I think the Giants are going to really try with Bryce Eldridge, and I think with Crawford, it's going to be, in my opinion, again, pitching is going to be what keeps him moving up the minor league ladder, and if he can hit, that's great too.
Do they want Crawford to start, or is he more of power out of the bullpen type of guy?
I think for now they're going to try to get him to start. They need to get his arm strength up to be able to do that at this point. I mean,
especially post-surgery.
17 innings in the last 2 years.
Yeah, so, that's why I'm saying, like, that's kind of hard to become a starter. Yeah. And then, I think people should take into consideration, like, a high school kid going straight into pro baseball and hitting like you described. Like, people don't understand. most kids in high school like him. You got to remember, they're not hitting guys who can throw in the 90s and like everybody in the minors. One or two kids maybe they'll play against other good prospects, but for the most part, they're playing against guys who might touch 80, but they're in the 70s, right? Like, high school pitching is not minor league pitching, right? So yeah, I think that's a very positive sign for anybody wanting to see if Eldridge is good to actually make the step. That's awesome. I think that's cool. Like, I just love seeing these dudes come out that young and picking up and having success right away. That's really cool.
It is.
I wanted to go back to this World Series real quick because I saw something last night and I was like, wait a minute, that can't be true. But apparently Corey Seager was a 2-time World Series MVP. When did the Dodgers win?
I mean, when did the history books
1988 is what I remember because I remember Kirk Gibson running around the bases. So I don't.
Oh yeah, doing that fist bump.
I remember that as a kid. Well, they're definitely like the Dodgers didn't win any time in recent memory. Like 2020 is like, that meme of the girl on the plane, like that motherfucker's not real. Like that is
yeah,
not a real title.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah. It's one of those things that, look in the history books it says that they won, but you're always going to have to add that caveat that like, hey, it was a 60-game season that year. So
no road games in the playoffs, no fans.
Yeah. No fans. It was a weird, odd year. And they was, it was a weird, odd year.
Did I go to a game? Did you go to any of the Giants games during that time?
No.
I don't know if I did or not. I can't remember. Well, yeah, I think I did. Yeah, I don't remember. I don't know. I went to a ton of games in the 21 season, but yeah, I think I did go to one of the, I don't know, whatever. It was a very weird time for sure. So next year, right? So, Bob Melvin comes in. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of turnover. There always is. There's so much arbitration going on. I just, one of the guys I just wish could stay healthy. He reminds me a lot of, and what was the dude? He was the left-handed dude that he was always like a pinch hitter with the Giants, and he ended up getting traded away, I think, or he signed elsewhere. God, what was that dude's name? Steven Duggar.
Oh, Steven Duggar. Okay, yeah.
Like I love Duggar. I just thought every time that dude played, that dude just played hard, and he was a grinder dude. But he can never stay healthy. Yeah. And he reminds me of he's the left-handed version of Austin Slater. Like I would love for Austin Slater to be able to just be healthy and play a full season because I feel like every time I watch him, and I know like he had this really awful stretch this year where I think he was like 0 for 35 or something.
He was 0 for a month.
Yeah, but I feel like every time Slater's out there, the dude just plays. And I'm hoping with guys like him that Melvin's not going to be like, oh, I'm sorry, there's a right-handed pitcher coming in now. You're not allowed to play baseball anymore. Like this whole Kapler iPad analytic bullshit. Like I cannot stand it. And I know for the most part, overall, there are splits that support this. But I think if you're it's like, can you imagine if Kapler coached Barry Bonds? Like, would Bonds only finish with like 600 home runs because he missed an opportunity to hit off of, left-handed pitchers? I mean, come on. Like, it's still baseball. These guys made their entire way up to this point being able to hit off of both sides. You don't just be like, well, starting in high school, hey, sorry, coach, can't. He's a righty. I'm a righty. I can't play tonight. Sorry, can't do it. So I'm just curious, like, do you think we're going to see more actual full-time, like, here's a lineup that we can expect every night and this non-platoon style that unfortunately we've come accustomed to in Giants land with Melvin?
Yeah. I mean, I think Melvin, I can't say I know exactly how he managed in Oakland. I know when he was in San Diego, he had guys like Machado and Tatis and all Bogarts and like, obviously you're going to play these guys every day. No one gives a shit as to who's pitching. But it really depends on the roster that he's given. If the roster is set up to where Austin Slater is a good, high functioning fourth outfielder who handles left-handed pitching, that's probably going to be the role that he plays. But I'd be surprised if anyone went as extreme with the platoons as Kapler did. I just can't envision Melvin doing that. And it also makes me wonder as to like what role Slater might have because you look at the numbers and, he plays hard. He does well against lefties, but the numbers just don't support him against right-handed pitching. And they really never have. even when he's done well, it's like usually a product of, you know, a high batting average on balls in play. But I just kind of wonder what role he's going to have with the Giants in 2023 if Melvin wants to play him out there for 400 at bats a year when, you know, half of those at bats are coming against right-handed pitching. That just may be an unfavorable matchup for him. So,
arbitration.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's an arbitration guy. I mean, I don't think he's going anywhere because the Giants really value his skill set. But it just kind of makes me wonder, him in particular, like being the soft side of a platoon matchup is really a tough role to fill. And, you know, I think Slater does that pretty damn well. But there, you know, he's also a streaky hitter, and there are just times like we saw in 2023 where he'll go pretty much a month without getting a hit. Like, it's crazy. But yeah,
I know I can do that. I could totally go.
Yeah, yeah. Give me a bat, right?
Give me a bat.
I can do that. But yeah, I think. I mean, I just can't imagine that Melvin manages as aggressive the platoons as Kapler did. So I think that means more playing time for somebody like Slater if he's still with the team. But you know, he's still going to be matched up against lefties quite a bit.
And then a big point of I would guess contention, because I know like you'll always be like, it's not too late to erase those Yash tweets, but I like Yastrzemski. Like, I was at Oracle for Yastrzemski's very first hit. It was a very high pop up bloop into the field. Yeah, I watched it, but I mean, now that's like we're 5 years later, I think, right?
Yep.
At least so, and I know he's arbitration guy as well, but I feel like the Giants just have too many outfielders, and none of them that anyone feels like, hey, these are our three, right? Especially if we're going to consider Matos full time in center. I'm over the Jock Peterson thing. I don't think Conforto is going to stick around as much as I like him, but he doesn't stay healthy either. Haniger we're stuck with for 2 more years, right?
Yep.
And then outside of Slater, which we already talked about, I like Sable. I think Blake Sable should be an outfielder. I mean, the dude's got power. He's like Jock Peterson out and left, but I think he's faster. Both of them I would take long. Like, going forward, I would take Sable over Peterson. I think they have very similar power. Peterson's probably a way more streaky power guy, but I think if Sable was given an opportunity to play a full season, that guy probably hits 20, 25 home runs. I think. I don't know if he's got a spot to do it, but that's, I think, like really tough roster decisions because we've got so many guys that are kind of like interchangeable. And I don't think that's a good thing to have on a team if you're trying to, win a world. Like, look at the rosters we just saw for the Diamondbacks and the Rangers. You could look at those 1 to 9 and be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to roll those guys every game.
Sure.
You don't really see that with the Giants. And then look how long it took for them to be like, oh yeah, we should probably play Wilmer Flores every day. Like, yeah, that guy could probably hit 35 home runs if you just play him against all pitchers. But it's like, so I'm so excited to see a different version of the lineup, but I just don't know who the hell's going to be in it. Like, who do you think's the starting 9 next year? You want to make a run at that? Aside from Bailey, we got Bailey, we've got Estrada, right? Okay. So you got 7 positions. I guess we're going to have Luciano at short.
Yep.
Who plays?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. I think, I don't think the infield was a glaring weakness. So I can understand that, hey, they just might be content with keeping it as is, but the outfield was, it just didn't, they didn't produce.
No,
guys like Conforto.
I'd rather see Wade back out there.
Yeah. I'm surprised that, and it makes me a little concerned about his like long-term projection. I'm a little concerned that they went with Wade so much at first base because he was originally an athletic outfielder.
Yeah. He was brought
when he was drafted.
So
I don't know what changed, like even as a corner outfielder. But they rarely used him out there.
I don't know if it was the knee. Maybe it was a lingering knee injury. They couldn't play him in the outfield.
Very well.
Yeah.
It very well could have been. But yeah, I mean, I think the infield is probably going to look pretty similar. Luciano, probably. JD Davis, probably. I mean, Estrada is going to be the starting second baseman, and then a combination of Wilmer Flores and Lamont Wade Jr. I think they're going to try to stay away from having a DH only player like they had with Jock Peterson last year. Like, he should not have been playing outfield. It's a mistake when that happens. Something went wrong every time. But the outfield as a whole, it's like they have a lot of options, but it's like, it's like I don't know if this is the right analogy, but like if you have like 3 QBs on your roster, then you have
Yeah, you
no
don't have anybody.
QBs on your
Yeah,
roster.
right.
So I mean, I think with the outfield, it's like, well, they have 5 options, but also they probably don't have any options who are like legitimate everyday players right now. I mean, you mentioned Mike Yastrzemski. It would have been nice to see what would have happened if he stayed healthy. He was a pretty
Yeah, I thought
productive player,
he
but
kind of bounced
he
back
missed half the season.
again.
Michael Conforto has the opt out, which maybe he exercises it. I'd be a little surprised. I just don't know if he gets more guaranteed money
Yeah, I
in
think
free
that's the
agency.
thing.
He could.
I don't.
And then there's Mitch Haniger, who's going to be playing somewhere. He can't be as bad as he was last year. I just like, you look at his numbers and it's like, well, this guy was a good player for a long time with Seattle. I'd be surprised if he was as bad as he was last year. Plus, there's he'll have an opt out after next year as well. So there might be some financial incentive to try and get back on track. And then Luis Matos, it's like, can he take an offensive jump? Like, I think he did. He finished the year nicely.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
I like Matos. I do.
but what's concerning about him is, he has the sprint speed,
Hmm.
but his defense in center field was pretty rough. His reads, and I remember seeing this last year too. His in 2022, his reads are not that great. His routes are not that great. So I mean, that's something that you can improve upon. Like you can't teach sprint speed. You can't teach
Yeah,
a fast person to be fast. Like he has that going
yeah,
for him, and I think
yeah.
that's the biggest quality. But there's a lot that has to happen right for the Giants for their outfield to really be productive. And I don't know. It just feels like they're betting too much on everything just kind of falling into place. So I mean I think that's one area that they can look to upgrade. I don't think they'd be too disappointed if Mike Conforto opted out.
Yeah, and then I mean, if he does, fine. But you're still stuck with Haniger. I don't think you're gonna be able to trade him.
Nope,
Um,
he's here.
he's here. Yeah, I don't know. I think the only thing that can really comfort Giants fans is some sort of pitching upgrade, and you're already down Cobb, so you're hoping Harrison sticks with Webb, and then yeah, Wood is clearly not the guy that was there in 21. Who's the other dude that just keeps hurting his ankle? I keep forgetting his name.
Oh, DeSclafani.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
I mean
not the
if
same. So,
yep.
and then I think already the Giants scoring with Mania, who kind of finished good, but nobody wants to see Sean Mania out there either. And then
Yep.
I don't know. And then my big man, I know no one. I get destroyed when I mention it. I just don't think Davila is a long term closer. Like that guy just doesn't seem to ever know where he's at any time. It doesn't matter what's it. I remember going to the Yankees game. I think it was the first series. It was the second game of the season. Crawford hit a
Yep.
home run, right? So, but
Yep.
the ball gets like 2 pitch count violations. The Yankees get like bases loaded and then he gets out of it. Like that's always what seems to happen. Is either he puts it's your and you just look at him. He's just like, oh, I'm supposed to pitch. You're right. Okay. And then I don't know. I don't really. That dude's arm talent is insane, but I just don't know if
It
he's
is.
someone you bank on in big pressure situations because he had that stretch where I think he blew like what 7 straight saves. I mean, this
Yeah, he had a
season
bad
could have went.
stretch.
It was such a weird season, man. Like it just really was, despite everything. But yeah, I come back to Duvall where I'm just like, I don't think he's the dude. I just
Yeah, I mean the margin of error for him, fortunately, is pretty high because he can throw, 100+ mile an hour,
yeah, it's ridiculous.
cut fastballs and sinkers and four seam fastballs.
Yeah,
It's like, it's a bunch of different looks. Plus, he has that slider that's just, it's just got, you know, fantastic vertical and horizontal movement. Opposing hitters really struggle against it, and to me, that tells you everything you need to know about his slider. But the margin for error is high. His command is never going to be great, and he's, I think he's still developing a little bit. I think, when he was coming up as a prospect, he was a starter, and he was a
really.
starter who threw hard with control issues, And the control issues are still prevalent to an extent, but when he's on, he's very good. But we saw that pretty rough stretch, and I think it was August where he blew several saves in a row. I don't have the exact number, but that was kind of ugly to see.
I wonder if his future's Chapman, but just at an earlier age, because Chapman's like the setup guy now, throwing 104. Like that just blows my mind. It's like that guy's your setup guy, and he may hit 3 batters in a row, because that's what I feel about Duvall at this point. Like I have never got to a game where Duvall goes in and I'm like, here we go, we got it, 100% confident. Like I'm just waiting for something bad to happen, and I never felt like that way. The Giants, I feel, have always going all the way back to Rod Beck. I always thought they had great closers. Like when they came in, you're like, all right, this is good. And I just don't feel that way with Duvall. That guy makes me nervous every time. But all right, Jay, I'm not going to keep you much longer. Go ahead. Let's do the prediction game. Where are the Giants finishing next year? What do we got? Don't say 5th place. Please don't say the Rockies are ahead of them, because then
I hope not. I mean, I've been bad at this the past couple of years. I said in 2022 they were going to win 87 games. I said in 2023 they were going to win 85 games. So I mean, take what I think with a massive grain of salt. And we also don't know like what moves they're going to make at any point. Let's just call it 82 wins. Let's
an improvement.
Be slightly optimistic.
That's all it takes to get in, right? Just got to get that last wild card.
Yeah. Well, 82 wins, you should be.
Like I don't think the Dodgers are going for. I think the Dodgers have peaked beyond anything they're going to do again next year. They still got Betts and Freeman, but I don't think that team's very good. I think they remind me of the Giants in 21, where they just massively overachieved. They got hot, but if you looked at them throughout the first 2 months of the season, it's kind of what I thought they were. They were just kind of. They were there. They're a good team, and then they got hot. But I don't think they're a very good team if you remove Betts and Freeman. Pitching staff's older. I know they got a few new guys coming up, but they're unreliable. Kershaw is Kershaw. Kershaw is my favorite because he's so good in the regular season. But when you really need him, the guy's just terrible, which I love to watch from a Giants perspective. But
it's fun.
And I don't know what maybe the Padres do better with a different manager, but they still don't have the pitching. And the Rockies are unfortunately the Rockies. And then the Diamondbacks, I honestly think they're positioned, I think, really well. They're going to have to replace Kelly because he's getting old, but they got a good team. And I hate Tommy Pham. Damn the guy. But I love their roster, man. I love those guys. I felt so bad actually was it Alec Thomas in center field last night on that? I don't know if you watched that game.
Yeah, I saw that. The misplay, that was pretty rough.
I watched that. I was like, oh my God, I felt like I was watching like my beer league softball league.
Yeah, it's like I've been there before. I know what he's going through.
Just never in like game 5 or game 6 of the World Series.
Yeah,
was like at the
everyone watching.
Yeah, never. I felt so bad for him in that moment, but I think the Diamondbacks, unfortunately, they're set for an extended period of success. So,
yeah, that's what it looks like.
Let's hope the Dodgers all get, maybe no, I won't say that. That's mean. Let's just wish the worst to the Dodgers and kind of go from there. I appreciate you hanging out for an hour or so on the happy hour. Thanks again, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric. This was fun.
Absolutely. Drink some wine. I'm gonna pour some more bourbon, and we'll kind of go from there. It's a little late for me out here, but enjoy your West Coast. It's the one thing I miss most about the West Coast is like everything with sports is over, and you still have your life. Out here, it's like, is it really midnight? And I got work tomorrow. This is terrible.
I wish I could. I go to bed super early. So it's like once the Giants game ends during the season, I'm in bed, I'm asleep.
Yeah, but that's perfect.
It is, but it's, I don't know. I wake up early, so
the Giants games come on most of the time at 10:10 out here. I'm like,
that's rough.
It's awful. Fortunately, like I moved to a different project to where I could at least start later. But man, I remember like when I had to get up at 5 every morning. I was just when the Giants game started. I'm like, I can't do this. I just watch 2 innings and see what happens as soon as I open Twitter.
Check in the morning. Yeah.
I know, man. All right, brother. I appreciate you. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.